which, if I never thought to mention it before, I now feel compelled to address. Tall, 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 tall man. You bend so as not to dent the firmament. You're made of elements I've never tasted. I crave you, tall man. I love your strident devotion to the real as knowable. I love your bump-bada-bum. I love your thumbtacks and shrouds. Wrap me in your arms and teach me how to talk to the moon in a way that pleases it. Yes, sometimes I want to pick up my own shadow and sling it at you. Yes, you make me so angry I burst into green, green flames. I love you. Forgive me. I have made you the object of poems. I have subjected you to much wheezing. Oh, tall man, love me like a hero, and I will give you an arrow from my quiver. Bump-bada-bum, sublime, sublime, sublime. This poem is called Litany, which, do you guys know what litany means? It's like a list, but like a prayer list. So, good. We're good here. Litany. Oh, you gods, you long-limbed animals, you astride the sea, and you unhammocked in the cypress grove, and you with your hair full of horses, please. My thoughts have turned from the savor of plums to the merits of pity. Touch and interrupt me. Chasten me with awe. Seed God and husk God, God of the open palm, you know the doubts that harrow me. You know my wrists are small. Oh, you with glass-colored wind at your call. You whose voice is soft as a turned page, whose voice returns air to its forms, send me a word for faith that also means his thrum, his coax, and her soft hollow. Please, friend gods, so when he says, you give it all away, I can say, I am not sorry. Catalog of ephemera. You give me flowers resembling Chinese lanterns. You give me hair yellow. You give me Vex. You give me lemon softened in brine, and you give me cuttlefish ink. You give me all 463 stairs inside Brunelleschi's dome. You give me seduction, and you let me give it back to you. You give me you. You give me an apartment full of morning smells, toasted bagel and black coffee and the freckled lilies in the vase on the windowsill. You give me 24 across. You give me flowers resembling moth's wings. You give me the first bird of morning alighting on a wire. You give me the sidewalk cafe with plastic furniture and the boys with their feet on the chairs. You give me the swoop of homemade kites in the park on Sunday. You give me afternoon-colored beer with lemons in it. You give me D.H. Lawrence, and he gives me pomegranates and sorb apples. You give me the loose tooth of California, the broken jaw of New York City. You give me the blue sky of Wyoming and the blue wind through it. You give me an ancient city where the language is a secret everyone is keeping. You give me a t-shirt that says all you gave me was this t-shirt. You give me pictures with yourself cut out. You give me lime blossoms, but not for which they symbolize, which in another poem that we discussed in class today is fornication. Just in case you're wondering. You give me yes. You give me no. You give me midnight apples in a car with the windows down. You give me the flash bulbs of an electrical storm. You give me thunder and the suddenly green underbellies of clouds. You give me the careening of trains. You give me the scent of bruised mint. You give me the smell of black hair, of blonde hair. You give me Apollo and Daphne, Pan and Syrinx. You give me Echo. You give me hyacinth and narcissus. You give me foxgloves and soft fists of peony. You give me the filthy carpet of an East Village apartment. You give me seeming not to notice. You give me an unfinished argument begun on the Manhattan-bound F train. You give me paintings of women with their eyes closed. You give me grief and how to grieve. I don't read this poem very often, but because it came up in Rebecca's class, I thought that I would read it. It's based on the paintings of a friend of mine named Boyce Cummings. And I can talk more about that maybe after the reading if anybody wants to know, but I feel like I should read the poem first, so just FYI. Verses. Man versus bird. The man envies the bird. The bird will never fall in love and say, I can't. The bird flutters in circles over its nest, startles at the rustle of leaves. The man, who can't inhabit the anxious mind of a bird, thinks, I wish I could fly. Bird versus snow. The bird knows snow has no opposite, nor does sea or machine, nor despair. The bird does not know it's the only creature possessed of this knowledge, so it doesn't try to tell the man, the woman, the bright, unbroken sky. Bird versus lamppost. The lamppost dims. The sky flaps like a sheet. Shadows hurry back into their objects. A moth, tattered and damp as the hem of a dress, shivers on the glass. The bird takes the moth. It will eat the small body, quilt its nest with the wings. Woman versus snow. The woman in the snow carves wide wings around herself. The bird swoops low. Man versus woman. The woman lies on her back, as women sometimes do. The man tries to speak to the bird in its language, but the bird hears a slight human accent and takes to the branches. The woman imagines herself falling into the sky, while the man falls slowly into himself, quiet and wanting and afraid. Woman versus herself. Her skin is cold and damp as a window. She looks at herself in the glass and thinks, yes, I have that to give. Sun diminishes frost on the pane. Outside, the sound of ice. So all of those poems are from the first half of this book. And the way I wrote this book, I started this book in 2006 when I was living in Rome. And I was always writing about my family, myself, my partner Craig, and his boy Robin, who we were raising. And it was always about having a somewhat unconventional family. We were happily unmarried, as we were pleased to tell everybody. And we kind of were sort of nomadic and kind of lived all over the place. And sometimes that was really hard. And I wanted to talk a little bit in this book about the ways that love can be beautiful even when it's tricky. So these poems that I've read now were all poems I wrote. The book is sort of organized almost by how I wrote the poems. So those poems were all written between like 2006 and 2008, and Craig had like seen a lot of the poems and had liked a lot of the poems. And he had seen quite a bit of the poem I'm about to read from, which is the index, which is at the center of the book. Which, as you will hear, changes direction right about in the middle of the poem, which is right about in the middle of the book. And then the book and the story and the life and everything sort of takes a slightly different trajectory. But the poem I'm about to read, the index, it begins with an epigraph from my late partner, Craig's own work. And it is, "They are, your heart stutters to see, the letters of another alphabet, a vast lace calligraphy, 100,000 characters of praise." A. Abandon. What I did when you touched me that winter with an ungloved hand. Ache. Broken things healing. Bones. Disappointments. Allegories of love, Fragonard's gossamered paintings, Ovid's pursuers and story looms, the longing to know how things become what they weren't always. Of death, the danse macabre on a grave with a skull-faced man. What should knowing we'll die elicit? What does salvation have to do with being safe? Angel bones, scapular acronia, where the wings uncouple, where the wings belong. Apartments, Brooklyn, its spiral staircase reminding me of Francis Bacon. All men rise to greatness by a winding stair. A bicycle chained there. South Dakota, we gave your son the only bedroom, woke early to salted baguette and snow. Salt Lake City, a porch ghost, a view of the valley's glittering grid. My sister, your poor broken friend, we grilled squid on the Smoky Joe. Laramie, a basement, a stoveless kitchen, toaster roasted eggplant, baseboard heat, and sex in woolen socks. Rome, 5B, kitchen, stone floors, kitchen, white as the madness I felt there. A bed made from twin beds held together with duct tape, always suggesting itself as a metaphor. Anger, yours, with your father, maybe, with me, mine, with you, for expressing it towards my family. There are other ways of telling the stories of our two angers, entwined like bodies in the act of love, but in this one, I am not a villain. Anne Carson, the short talks from Plainwater, poolside in Greece, while an Easter parade clanked pots and pans, congregating in doorways for ouzo and bread. Autobiography of Red, in which Geryon understands that people need acts of attention from one another. Antelope Island, you should have seen my father's face as the herd of bison loped across the road not 10 feet from where we sat in our rented car. We watched the grace pool out around their hooves. I suppose you cannot make statements about the loveliness of something until you've watched it move. Attention, see also Anne Carson. Geryon understood that people need acts of attention from one another. B. Babette, the cat. You were angry when I got her because I hadn't consulted you. And what, I asked, do you ever consult me about? I got to keep the cat. She slept on your chest. You were such a still sleeper. Binary. Code allows a computer to represent text. B is 011-00010. LOVE is a series of ones and zeros where 0 means off and 1 means on. Opposition. such as presence absence, sex innocence, desire attainment, form rapture, UI, star. Two astronomical bodies orbiting each other so closely their lights knit and appear as one. Bogota, a city in the Andes surrounded by steep jungle. We did not fight in Bogota. The Mexican restaurant, full of wooden stairs, overlooks expanses of modernist architecture, colonial plazas, lit-up slums. La Candelaria, home to statues of ghosts, presence of absence. Vendors sell hot corn. We passed a woman laying on the sidewalk, her pregnant belly swollen in half globes around a dark scar, like a peach around its deep groove. Storytellers ride the buses. Scattered petals and piles of thorns and broad bruised leaves carpet the lot of a flower market that teems in the day. Sushi joint. Iranian embassy. Buildings trimmed with tropical flowers and razor wire. We watched Bollywood dubbed into Spanish on the dial-tuned TV in your sublet apartment. Bollywood, where love is an exuberant fantasy of song, where a story stops before it ends. D. Deadwood, ringing with slot machines. We drank pear wine in a stale motel. I said, you take me to all the nicest places. You funny voiced me back, what do you want? They got ice machines, they got HBO, dial up some va-va-boom. We showered together, and your peppermint soap gave me chills. Desire, a chord played deep in the base of the body, loud enough to drown yourself out. Dido, queen of Carthage, a mighty widow, rebuilder of ruined empires, devotee of the gods, ruined by rumor, by love, ruined unto death by a traveler who was nobody's king. Divorce, far from a way you thought you had of thinking of yourself. This story includes a divorce, which is how I come in. D.H. Lawrence, see also Desire, tells us, no, no, it is the three strange angels. Admit them, admit them. E. Emily, my sister, when asked what single thing she'd bring to a desert island, said, a yacht. Like me, she fears to make mistakes. Epithet, Homeric, such as swift-footed even when the hero is sitting down, or breaker of horses. For women, soft-braided or glancing. I have some for you, tall man. You have some for me. Eros, son of Aphrodite, who according to Seneca smites maids' breasts with unknown heat and bids the very gods leave heaven and dwell on earth in borrowed form. X, a prefix meaning formerly and no more, connoting renunciation when affixed to nouns such as lover and Catholic, not likely to be placed before certain other nouns such as sister or bicycle. H, Hacienda Guachipelin, a farm in Costa Rica near Rincon de la Vieja on the Nicaraguan border. You climbed a volcano while I rode a horse with a vaquero named Henry. Waterfall, Cotimundi. I met 3 stewardesses at a hot spring who painted me with mud, curing my sunburn. Gin and tonics by the pool. You kept rolling mirrors across your brow. A woman carrying a sloth up the mountain had asked you, do you want to touch my sloth? You said no. Pretty sure she'd try to charge you. Heart. Jose Asuncion Silva put on a white shirt and went to the doctor. He asked the doctor to draw on his shirt the exact size and location of the human heart in the body. Silva went home, loaded a pistol, muzzled it dead center of the outline, and fired. J. Julian of Norwich says, sin is behoovely, meaning fitting, meaning Only by sinning can we receive God's mercy. Good. I sin a lot. She also says, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. Just, not in the sense of right or fair, but simply or enough. Example, just because the world is beautiful doesn't mean it will satisfy us. K. Kuchino Irabushima, an island, see also volcanoes. You called me from the ferry. I was talking about Zhukovsky, you were saying you hated Zhukovsky, you were happy and told me I would hate it there. The sea was very rough. You said, I love you, I miss you. I said, I love you, I miss you too. You said, tell Robin I love him. That's as far as I went with you. Q. Quandary. A problem with no solution. See also desire. R. Re Bug School Conference. Re guest list. Re of course. Re no way. Re OMMFG. Re poems. Re more poems. Re when you get a chance. Re Mexico. Re asshole student behavior advice. Re beautiful. Re oh Reginald, I'm so bored. I do wish the London season would begin. Re yes. Re yay. Re amazing. Re don't hate me. Re and that's what I mean when I talk about gods. Risk. What you risk reveals what you value, Winterson says. You play, you win. You play, you lose. You play. Rome. Shopping for vegetables. You held my hand as we wandered the Esquiline market, where an Arab vendor told us we could see his fish were freshest because their eyes most resembled glass. The rabbits all have ears, so customers can be sure they aren't stray cats. We stopped at the Euro place, bags bristling with onion stems and fennel. Back home we left our bags slumped in the kitchen and laid down together in our bedroom, high ceilings, salt white in the profusion of afternoon sun. I remember my eyes stung with the excess of light. W. Widow. A woman whose husband has died. So, not me. But many of the obelisks in the Provincetown cemetery commemorate captains and whalers lost at sea and their widows. In this sense, I am like those women. Wittgenstein says, the world is all that is the case. Once I wrote it, the word is all that is the case. Also, pubic parks. Oh well. Words. I love, for instance, radio, milk, diaphanous, and smudge. This has to do with their sound, ways they mean, and how they look unsurrounded on a page or written in marker across the back of a hand as you used to do when you didn't want to forget. Write. A grocery list, or a name and a telephone number on the title page of a book or a corner of a coaster. Write emails requesting voter registration forms. Write out prescriptions. Write your name on a marriage license or a birth certificate or bond. Write a love letter. Write a play about a man who looks at things and is made better by them, who looks at things that make him sad. Write a statement of purpose. Here is my statement of purpose. Yes, you. X. X marks the spot. Sex, vex, hex. See also X. XXX. The lit up symbol in a smutty magazine shop. Parking lot crammed with 18-wheelers and one lonely BMW sedan. Ever been to one of those? I asked you. You said you can't learn anything about sex from porn. Z. Zenith. The peak. The point. Zephyr. The other wind. Not the mistral, but the green-faced wind with its cheeks puffed out. The stir of tablecloths, sundresses, curls, the messenger of spring. Right. So this next one I'm going to read about probably like 4 more poems, maybe roughly, so you can pace your attention accordingly. This next one I'm going to read is called Obsessional, and so it's a villanelle, which is really more of like a French parlor trick than a poetic form, if you ask me. But they're pretty fun to write. And you'll hear that there are a lot of repeated lines throughout the poem. That's part of its structure. And there's an epigraph, I'm tired of getting over things, from Martha Rock. What makes a man impossible to find? On such a chip of land it's hardly there. Could it be worse than what I have in mind? I know where you are not, but I'm still blind to any trace of how, or when, or where. What makes a man impossible to find? I wonder, is this ignorance more kind than knowing what transpired? Does this spare my wits from worse than what I have in mind? I feel sometimes as though the world's designed to show me how without you can't compare to with you, man impossible to find. I still can't pack away things that remind me how you put your mouth around my ear and breathe into me what you had in mind. Someday I hope I can become resigned to knowing it's not knowing I must bear. What makes a man impossible to find? Could it be worse than what I have in mind? All right, and for this next poem, which is a poem in 2 voices, I have Rebecca, my lovely helper. Thank you so much. All right. We could probably share the mic, or we can just project. If we project very loudly, can you hear us?
Yes.
Excellent.
He lived a good life.
I envied him a little.
My condolences.
Wait, I'm sorry. We're going to have to start over because I should say, first of all, this is called Losing Language, a Phrase Book. And it's sort of a translation project. So Rebecca's going to read some cliche phrases that are very important that we exchange with each other when we're grieving. And I'm going to read a series of sort of translations. That's probably what to say. All right, sorry. Let's read.
He lived a good life.
I envied him a little.
My condolences.
You look like you've been trying to drown yourself.
My sympathies.
I fear to say something that might make it worse.
Life goes on.
Don't forget us just because we're still alive.
He was doing what he loved.
There is still such a thing as a good bed.
He'll always be with you.
You don't have to try so hard.
You're so brave.
I wonder what it's like when you're alone.
You're so strong.
I can see you've showered.
You've handled it with such grace.
You've done nothing that can't be repaired.
Let me know if you need anything.
I won't come around again.
He lived so much in one lifetime.
He did just as he pleased.
He lived large.
I saw him drunk. He laughed with his mouth wide open.
He lived well.
He knew things. How the soul is electrified running your thumb across a lover's body. How a good martini makes a breeze inside the skull.
He was a wonderful father.
Whatever else I may have thought of him.
He was so loved.
His exes are unusually distraught.
He loved you so much.
What was private is now a secret.
Time heals all wounds.
Including the ones he gave you before he died.
I am very sorry for your loss.
I am very sorry for your loss.
I am very sorry for your loss.
You are very sorry for my loss. You may not understand it, but I do not understand it.
It takes time.
You changed to belong with him. You learned, for example, that he makes excellent poached eggs and liked driving long distances. Now you must relearn to spoon just enough vinegar and have not to be hypnotized by the fleeting white dashed line.
It's not right.
How is this grimacing salesman in the world, and not he?
It's just terrible.
If I could, I would give the gods this salesman in exchange. I would, without hesitation, have my lever back.
We can't know the reason.
It's just as well the gods do not approach me with an explanation or a deal.
One day perhaps we'll understand.
It's true. I am less afraid to die now.
Thank you.
For the casserole, the box of wine, for the walk, I needed to feel the sun on my hands.
Thank you.
For cleaning the cat box, for watching me nap, for the money.
Thank you.
When I didn't know where to put my attention, for your conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
For not leaving me alone. Thank you. Okay, we're getting there. 3 poems. I'm going to read, I don't care what anybody says. I think Facebook's fun. I'm just saying. And when I was grieving, it was really important to me as a way of staying connected to people. Many of my people are very far away from me at any given time. But of course, Facebook also, it's just you sitting in a room with it, so there's like this temptation to sort of forget that people are actually listening, which can be a problem, just saying. But I actually learned a lot about how I wanted to write this book from experimenting with Facebook status updates. It was like having a focus group. I could post things and like see if people were like, whoa, no, nope, and they'd call me to make sure I was okay, and then I could post other things. We were like, that's funny that you wrote that. And I was like, okay, I get it. I know where the line is now. So like, I'm not joking, I really did sort of use it that way. So I have 2 poems in here called Status Update, and both of them are sort of culled from various things that went up on the Facebook focus group, crowdsource mind, hive mind wall, like when I was kind of going through some of this. And so here's one of them. And I often get lost in this poem, which I'm going to genuinely attempt not to do, but it means that I can't probably do the thing where I like look up and make eye contact with you guys, because then I'll be like, what? Oh, where was I? So if I don't, that's why. It's not because I don't love you. Status update. Rebecca Lindenberg is drinking whiskey, feels guilty, is caught in one of those feedback loops, is a blankety-blank, is a trollop, a floozy, a brazen hussy, would like to add you as a friend, would like to add you as an informant, would like to add you as her dark marauder, as her lord and savior, has trouble with boundaries. Rebecca Lindenberg is keeping lonesomeness at bay with frequent status updates designed to elicit a thumbs-up icon from you. Rebecca Lindenberg likes this, dismisses this with a backhanded wave. Rebecca Lindenberg wraps her legs around this, has this ball of string you can follow out of her labyrinth, has this labyrinth. Rebecca Lindenberg has high hopes, has high blood sugars. Rebecca Lindenberg does not want to upset you, wants to say what you want to hear. Rebecca Lindenberg thinks of poetry as the practice of overhearing yourself. Rebecca Lindenberg thinks about love, about ribbons unspooling. Rebecca Lindenberg would like to add you as a profound influence, would like to add you as a loyal assassin, would like to add you as her date to the reckoning. Rebecca Lindenberg remembers a statue of a faceless girl with shapely feet. Rebecca Lindenberg remembers the Italian for chicken breasts is petti di pollo, and the word for kilogram is kilo, and that a kilo is way too much chicken breast for a family of 3. Steals sage from strangers' gardens, runs for it, misses Rome, misses her family of 3, is lost in her own poem. Rebecca Lindenberg has dreams in which you come back, Rebecca Lindenberg lets it go. Rebecca Lindenberg crescendos and decrescendos. Rebecca Lindenberg is, hey, you, come here. Rebecca Lindenberg is, you are not the boss of me. Rebecca Lindenberg is not the boss of you. Rebecca Lindenberg goes to movies, needs a bigger boat, gave you a heart and you gave her a pen, can't handle the truth. Rebecca Lindenberg loves the truth, loves the smell of dirt gathered in water and the sleet smell of your morning body, loves her rumpled cat, her jimmied window, loves long letters, will write. This poem is called Obade, and an obade, which is A-U-B-A-D-E, in case you did not know, is traditionally a poem of parting at dawn. So y'all do the math on how that works. Obade. I woke in a gold dress, you in jeans. Morning filled wine bottles in the kitchen. Fine mica glitter of fish scales and salt. Outside, it was quiet. You said, that went well, don't you think? Sun behind you. I kissed the hole in the light and said, yes. And I am going to end with the very last poem in the book called Marblehead. And Marblehead is a town on the north shore of Massachusetts. It's just a little north of Boston. And it is where our family has a home, and so we spent a lot of time there. And this poem has an epigraph from one of my favorite American poets, a guy named James Schuyler. Not to be in love with you, I can't remember what it was like. It must have been lousy. Marblehead. You take off your black motorcycle jacket, hang it on the back of a chair. It's cold from our walk along the seawall. Your pockets jingle with shells. While we were gone, you left the stove on low. Some things you do make me so nervous. You graze the surface of sauce simmering in a pan, shiny fingertip held out for me to lick. You say, what does it mean? Maybe nothing. Maybe honey to unbitter the lime. Later that night, you will bury your face in my belly and sob, I'm sorry. Though I don't think you are. Always talking to me, my love. But now, lobster steam billows up the window. You gulp a sip of wine, your pinky sticking out, and the round olives are the green. All green things aspire to be. Thank you very much. So I guess we have like a couple of minutes, and I am happy to answer any questions that anybody might have, if you do. Yeah.
Does it make you sad to read these poems over and over and be stuck in this book until it's, or is it a joyful thing, or is it totally separate from the subject matter, I suppose?
It's an exaltation. This book is, I don't even think of it so much as a book that I wrote about my family. I think of it as a book I wrote to my family. So for me, it's really fun. It's like a repository of mostly good memories, and I enjoy reading from it. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. I promise.
I'm not having a good time.
I am. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
Might be kind of a weird question, but like, okay, when I was reading this book, I noted down like certain themes that I saw repeated a lot, and one of them was food. What is food mean to you?
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you something. You're a smart girl, first of all. I love food. We did a lot of cooking and eating together. We absolutely did. I do a lot of cooking and eating in general. I like wake up in the morning and like the first best thought of the day is, I get to eat all day today. It's like a whole new day. I haven't even started yet. Food to me, you know, well, on one hand, it's like so satisfying to cook. As a writer, so much of what I do is really cerebral. That it's really fun to like make something with your hands and produce like an actual thing in the world that then you can share with somebody that gives them, hopefully, not always, pleasure. You know, sometimes you just gotta try new stuff. It doesn't always work. But it's really fun. Making is fun. I enjoy making. But it's also, you know, poetry to me is the stuff of the senses. And food is also the stuff of the senses. Sight, smell, taste, texture. To me, they belong to a similar experience in a lot of ways. Good question. Yeah.
You write in many different forms and structures. How do you not fall into a comfort area and, you know, branch out?
You decide. There was a long time after I finished this book where I was writing poems that could have gone in this book. So I made myself be silent for a little while I became a slightly different person. And then I started writing again with a different project in a really different way. Still kind of experimenting with forms, but really different kinds of forms and really different questions, maybe more importantly. For me, the form follows the question, right? So for me, the question of this book was, it's not that so much that I want to write about love and grief and mystery, that's inevitable. I want to write about the problems and complications of trying to language love and grief and mystery. And man, that was really frustrating to try to do. And I sort of realized at some point that the closest I was ever going to get to what I was trying to kind of discover was a sort of gloss, which is why a lot of the poems are footnotes and indexes and definitions and and marginalia, because they are ways of admitting that this is as good as it's going to get, as close as it's going to get. Without giving up, you know? It's like, you still got something, right? This is as close as you're gonna get. It's gonna have to do. But for me, writing is like a radically humbling experience. And so the forms for this project are an admission of that. The forms for other projects are different because they're different questions and different problems. So the form, you could fall into a rut with a form because things like an index are really fun to write. But you have to find the question, and then the form will follow, I think. So. Good question, though. Yeah. Uh-huh.
What's your revision process like? Is it all your ideas mostly just on your first go around, or do you have to revise a lot?
Everybody has to revise a lot. Don't ever let anybody tell you different. That said, how you revise, for me, honestly, the only absolutely surefire way to revise is to write something and then put it down and walk away and ignore it until you become a slightly different person, and then go back as a slightly different you and reread it. And sometimes we'll be like, gosh, look what I made. You want to be like, did anybody see that? Did you see what I just did? Like, that is so cool. And a lot of times you're like, seriously, Lindenberg, what the wuck were you thinking? Right away. Or sometimes in between, you know, you take stuff out. Sometimes you throw it away. Sometimes you save it somewhere else. But I think you have to get some perspective on it. Like, time is really the only surefire way to revise. However, there are lots and lots of other things that you can do to revise. But again, for me, this would sort of come back to the idea of the question. Like, is this poem addressing my question? And if there are parts, if the poem gets distracted from the question at some point, like, that part's gotta go. If the poem veers away from the question, do that when you're writing, like, let it go. But when you go back and you're revising, maybe, like, turn it back around again and start over halfway through. You know, if there's, like, a digression that's just not doing anything for the question, out it goes. I have never, in my revision process, made anything bigger than it was before I started revising. I will say that. I hope that answers your question. Yeah?
So you said you start when you're writing with a question. So that means you know the direction of where the poem is going right from the beginning, because you have a question and know the answer.
I don't know any answers. No, in fact, so this actually kind of came up in Rebecca's class. We were talking about, like, you know, Donald Hall has this great essay on this unsayable said, and like, I really mean the word question. The poem is not an answer to the question. The poem is a formulation of the question. And, like, sometimes poetry seems hard because I don't think we write poetry because we have something to say. I think we write poetry because we have something we don't know how to say, or we cannot say, or possibly cannot be said. So the stuff of the poem, the analogy I like to use is it's a bit like dark matter in the universe. Like, we know it exists. You can't see it. You can measure its effects on the things that orbit it, its gravitational pull on a nearby star. The stuff in the poem, I think, is the thing, is what's orbiting the dark matter at the center of the poem. This is why poems resist paraphrase, I think. Really good poems do. Because they really are built around an unsayable thing or an unformulatable question that is driving the poem. It is necessitating the poem. It is suggesting the material that goes into the poem. But it's bigger in a way than the poem, and the poem will never really quite get it, which is why, you know, like when we say, like, poetry is hard because the stuff of poetry is hard. I mean, that's kind of how I think about it. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I might have rephrased, but do you ever change the question during the revision process? Or you
Yes.
Okay, that was really my real question.
Sorry. Sure. Yeah. You learn more about the question while you're working on it, so definitely. Yeah. Anything else?
Well, thanks again, Rebecca.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.